Kessa Thane pressed her face against the cold metal of the transport ship's window. Stars stretched past her like tiny diamonds scattered across black cloth. At 19 years old, she had never been this far from Earth before. Her stomach felt tight with nervous excitement. "First time in deep space?" asked the ship's captain, a tall blue-skinned Zephyrian with kind yellow eyes. "Yes, sir," Kessa replied, not taking her eyes off the view. "I still can't believe I got accepted for the internship." The captain smiled. "The Galactic Research Station is lucky to have you. Not many humans studies in archaeology. Most of your species prefer to look forward, not backward." Kessa finally turned from the window. "That's exactly why I want to study old civilizations. Humans are always rushing ahead. Sometimes I think we miss important things, because we don't slow down to look at what came before us." 2 hours later, the massive research station came into view. It looked like a giant metal flower floating in space, with long arms reaching out toward the planet below. Each arm held different laboratories and living quarters for the many species that worked there. Kessa gathered her few belongings and prepared to dock. Her heart raced as she thought about the opportunity ahead of her. She would be working with Dr. Vextar, one of the most famous archaeologists in the galaxy. He had studied dead civilizations for over 200 years. The docking process was smooth, and soon Kessa found herself walking through corridors filled with beings she had only seen in textbooks. Tall, rocky creatures called lithoids moved slowly past her. Small, quick insectoids buzzed through the air using tiny wings. She tried not to stare, but everything was so new and amazing. "You must be the human intern," said a voice behind her. Kessa turned to see a Zephyrian approaching. He was shorter than the ship's captain, with darker blue skin and white markings around his large eyes. "I am Dr. Vextar. Welcome to the station." "Thank you, sir," Kessa said, trying to sound professional. "I'm honored to work with you." Dr. Vextar began walking, and Kessa hurried to keep up. "Tell me, Miss Thane, what do you know about the Vorthic civilization?" Kessa thought carefully before answering. They were the first species to travel between stars. They built amazing cities and had technology we still don't understand. But they disappeared about 5,000 years ago. No one knows why. "Correct," Dr. Vextar said as they entered a large elevator. "And what do you know about the artifact we study here?" "Only what I read in the files." "You found something called the Nexus Sphere in their ruins. It's been here for 300 years, but no one has been able to make it work." The elevator stopped and they walked out into a circular room with white walls and bright lights. In the center of the room sat a large glass container. Inside the container was a perfect black sphere, about the size of a basketball. It looked smooth and clean, like polished stone. "There it is," Dr. Vextar said. "The most frustrating object in the galaxy." Kessa stared at the sphere. It looked simple, almost plain. "It doesn't look very special." "That is exactly the problem," Dr. Vextar explained. "We have tried everything. The Crystalline Collective attempted to channel pure energy into it. The Void Elders used their ancient mental powers. The Mechanical Union scanned it with every tool they possess. Nothing works. It sits there like a dead rock." Other scientists worked quietly around the room. Kessa noticed they came from many different species, but they all had the same tired look in their eyes. "What do you think it was supposed to do?" Kessa asked. Dr. Vextar's expression grew thoughtful. "We believe it was some kind of test or puzzle." The Vorthic were known for their love of complex challenges. But whatever the answer is, it has remained hidden for centuries. Over the next few days, Kessa learned more about the station and its work. She studied files about the Vorthic civilization and learned about their amazing achievements. They had built cities that floated in the air. They had ships that could travel faster than light. They had even learned to control weather on entire planets. but the sphere remained a mystery. Casa watched as teams of scientists ran the same tests over and over. They measured its weight, took pictures from every angle, and tried to scan its inner structure. Nothing changed. The sphere just sat there, black and silent. "Why do you think the Vorthik made it?" Casa asked Dr. Vextar one evening as they ate dinner in the station's cafeteria. "Perhaps they wanted to leave a message for future civilizations," he replied. "Or maybe it was meant to teach us something important. The Vorthik were very wise. But if they were so wise, why did they disappear?" Dr. Vextar was quiet for a moment. "That is another mystery we may never solve." Casa looked around the cafeteria at all the different species eating and talking together. "Do you think they would be proud of us? All these different races working together?" "I believe they would," Dr. Vextar said. "The Vorthik valued cooperation and understanding. In their writings, they spoke often about the importance of different minds working toward common goals." That night, Casa lay in her small room, thinking about the sphere. She had read every report and study about it. Every known species in the galaxy had tried to activate it. The smartest minds, the most advanced technology, the oldest wisdom, nothing had worked out as she drifted off to sleep. One question kept spinning in her mind. What if they were all thinking about the problem in the wrong way? What if the answer wasn't about being smart or powerful or advanced? What if the sphere was looking for something else entirely? She didn't know it yet, but tomorrow would change everything. Tomorrow, she would finally meet the Nexus sphere face to face. The next morning, Casa walked into the laboratory with her tablet and measurement tools. Dr. Vextar had given her the task of documenting the sphere's physical properties. It was basic work, but she was happy to help. "Just take measurements from different angles," Dr. Vextar had explained. "We do this every month to make sure nothing has changed. It will help you get familiar with the artifact." The lab was quiet this morning. Most of the research team was attending a conference call with scientists from other worlds. Casa was alone with the sphere for the first time. She set up her equipment on a table near the containment field. The glass barrier hummed softly with energy. She had been told it was there to protect the sphere from contamination, not to keep it contained. After all, the sphere had never shown any sign of being dangerous. Casa started with basic measurements. Length, width, height, all exactly the same. The sphere was perfectly round. She took photos from the top, sides, and bottom. Everything looked normal and boring, just like always. Then she needed to measure the distance between the sphere and the containment field walls. This meant she had to walk closer to get accurate readings. Casa stepped forward, holding her measuring device steady. She was focused on getting the numbers right, not really looking at the sphere itself. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps closer. The laboratory suddenly filled with soft blue light. Casa looked up in shock. The sphere was glowing. Deep blue light pulsed gently from its surface, like a slow heartbeat. For a moment, she couldn't move. She just stared at the impossible sight. "Oh my God," she whispered. She took a step backward. The light grew dimmer. She stepped forward again. The light grew brighter. Her heart pounded so hard she could hear it in her ears. After 300 years of silence, the sphere was finally responding. And it was responding to her. Casa moved to the left. The light seemed to shift in her direction, like it was watching her. She moved to the right. The light followed her movement. "This can't be happening," she said out loud. She ran to the emergency communication panel on the wall and pressed the alert button. "Dr. Vextar! Dr. Vextar, please come to Lab 7 immediately. The sphere it's doing something." Within minutes, the laboratory door burst open. Dr. Vextar rushed in, followed by 3 other scientists. They all stopped suddenly when they saw the glowing sphere. By the ancient stars, Dr. Vextar breathed. How long has it been doing this? Just a few minutes, Kessa said, her voice shaking. I was taking measurements and I got close, and then it just started glowing. Dr. Vextar activated his communicator. All research teams to Lab 7 immediately. Cancel all other activities. The Nexusphere is active. Over the next hour, the laboratory filled with excited scientists. They came from every department on the station. Some arrived still wearing their sleeping clothes. Others came running from the middle of their own experiments. Move away from the sphere, Miss Thane, ordered Dr. Kellex, a senior crystalline researcher. We need to run proper tests. Kessa stepped back to the far wall. The sphere's light immediately dimmed to almost nothing. Interesting, Dr. Vextar said. Miss Thane, please approach the sphere again. Kessa walked forward slowly. As she got closer, the blue light grew stronger. When she reached the spot where she had been taking measurements, the light was as bright as before. Remarkable, said Dr. Yenth, an insectoid scientist. The artifact appears to be responding specifically to the human. They spent the next several hours running tests. Other humans were brought to the laboratory from different parts of the station. The sphere ignored them completely. Scientists from various species approached the containment field. Nothing happened. Only Kessa could make the sphere respond. We need to contact the Galactic Council, Dr. Vextar said. This is the most important discovery in centuries. While the senior scientists made their urgent communications, Kessa remained near the sphere. She was amazed by what was happening, but also confused and a little scared. Why me? She asked quietly. I'm nobody special. I'm just a student. As if hearing her question, the sphere's light pulsed once, very brightly. Then strange symbols began to appear on its surface. They looked like writing, but not from any language Kessa recognized. The symbols moved and shifted like living things. Dr. Vextar, Kessa called out. The symbols. Look at the symbols. Everyone gathered around the containment field to watch. The symbols continued to change and flow across the sphere's surface. They formed patterns that almost looked familiar, but not quite. Can anyone read this? Dr. Vextar asked. The scientists studied the symbols carefully. They compared them to thousands of known languages in their databases. Nothing matched. These might be Vorthic symbols, suggested Dr. Yenth. But we only know a few words of their language. Hours passed. More scientists arrived from other stations and nearby worlds. The laboratory became crowded with the greatest minds in the galaxy, all trying to understand what was happening. Kessa grew tired from standing so long, but every time she moved away from the sphere, it became dim and the symbols disappeared. She felt responsible for keeping it active, even though she didn't understand why. Miss Thane, Dr. Vextar said gently, you should rest. We'll set up a schedule so you can take breaks. No, it's okay, Kessa replied. I want to stay. This is incredible. As the day went on, Kessa noticed something else. The sphere seemed to respond to her emotions as well as her position. When she felt excited about a new discovery, the light grew brighter. When she felt frustrated by all the questions without answers, the symbols moved faster. I think it can. Sense how I'm feeling, she told Dr. Vextar. That's impossible, said Dr. Kellex. There are no known technologies that can read emotions from a distance. But Kessa was certain. To test her theory, she concentrated on feeling calm and peaceful. The sphere's light became steady and soft. Then she thought about something that made her angry, how some humans treated other species badly. The sphere's light flickered and the symbols turned red. It's definitely responding to my emotions, she said. By the end of the day, word of the discovery had spread throughout the galaxy. Scientists, government officials, and curious beings from dozens of worlds were making plans to visit the station. The quiet research facility was about to become the center of galactic attention. But for all their excitement and study, no one could answer the most important question. Why did the sphere respond to Kessathane, a 19-year-old human archaeology student, when it had ignored the galaxy's greatest minds for 3 centuries? That night, as Kessa finally left the laboratory to get some sleep, the sphere went dark again. But she knew that tomorrow would bring new mysteries and new questions. Something told her that this was just the beginning. 3 days had passed since the sphere first activated, and the research station was busier than it had ever been. Ships arrived hourly, bringing scientists, officials, and reporters from across the galaxy. The small laboratory had been moved to the station's largest conference room to accommodate all the observers. Kessa sat in a chair next to the containment field, feeling overwhelmed. Everyone wanted to study her, ask her questions, and run tests on her. They had analyzed her blood, scanned her brain, and examined every detail of her life history. Nothing they found explained why she was special. Perhaps it's her human DNA, suggested Dr. Zaleth, a famous geneticist from the Corvian Empire. Humans have unique genetic markers that other species lack. We tested 12 other humans, Dr. Vextar replied. The sphere ignored them all. Maybe it's her age, offered Professor Gent, an elderly lithoid researcher. She is quite young. Perhaps the artifact responds to youthful energy. We brought children from several species, said Dr. Yenth. No response. Kessa listened to the endless theories with growing frustration. Everyone was talking about her like she wasn't there. They discussed her genetics, her brain patterns, her energy fields, and her family history. But no one was asking her what she thought. Finally, she couldn't stay quiet anymore. "Excuse me," Kessa said, standing up. The room fell silent. "Can I say something?" Dr. Vextar nodded. "Of course, Miss Thane. Your input is valuable." Kessa looked around at all the brilliant minds gathered in the room. "You're all trying to figure out what makes me special, right? What I have that other people don't have." "That's correct," said Dr. Zaleth. "Understanding your unique properties is key to solving this mystery. But what if you're asking the wrong question?" Kessa said. "What if it's not about what I have, but about what I'm doing?" The scientists looked confused. Professor Gent spoke first. "What do you mean, young human?" Kessa walked closer to the sphere. As always, it began to glow when she approached. "Everyone keeps saying the sphere is responding to me. But what if it's not? What if it's trying to communicate with me?" "The difference is semantic," Dr. Zaleth said dismissively. "Response and communication are similar concepts." "No, they're not," Kessa insisted. "If it's just responding, then I'm making it do something. But if it's communicating, then it wants to tell me something. And maybe the reason it chose me isn't because of my genes or my age. Maybe it's because I'm the only one who's listening the right way." Dr. Vextar leaned forward with interest. "Explain what you mean by listening the right way." Kessa thought for a moment. "Everyone who's tried to activate the sphere has been looking for answers. You want it to tell you about Vorthic technology, or give you their knowledge, or solve some ancient mystery. But what if it doesn't want to give you answers? What if it wants to ask you questions?" The room was completely quiet now. Even the usually talkative insectoid scientists had stopped buzzing their wings. "That's an interesting theory," Dr. Vextar said carefully. "But how could we test it?" Instead of answering, Kessa turned toward the sphere. She placed her hand as close to the containment field as safely possible and spoke directly to it. "I don't want anything from you," she said softly. "I'm not here to take your secrets or steal your knowledge. I just want to understand what you're trying to tell me." The sphere's blue light pulsed gently, and new symbols appeared on its surface. But these symbols were different from before. They seemed simpler, more organized. Kessa concentrated on the patterns, letting her mind relax instead of trying to analyze them. Gradually, she began to sense something that felt almost like emotions coming from the sphere. Curiosity, loneliness, and something else, something that felt like hope. "You've been waiting," she whispered. "You've been waiting for someone to ask the right questions." The sphere pulsed brighter, and suddenly the symbols began to make sense. Not as words or language, but as feelings and ideas. Kessa gasped as images flashed through her mind. She saw a great civilization of tall, graceful beings with silver skin and large eyes. The Vorthik. They lived in beautiful cities that floated among the clouds. They had achieved amazing things. They could control the weather, travel instantly between stars, and even create new forms of life. But something was wrong. Despite all their achievements, the Vorthik looked sad. In the images, Kessa could see them going through their daily lives like machines, following the same patterns over and over. They had all the answers they needed, but they had lost something important in the process. What did you lose? Kessa asked the sphere. More images flooded her mind. She saw Vorthik children who never played, only studied. She saw adults who never laughed, only worked. She saw a society where every question had an answer, every problem had a solution, and every mystery had been solved. You lost your wonder, Kessa realized. You figured out everything, and then you had nothing left to discover. The sphere's light grew so bright that several scientists stepped back. The symbols on its surface moved faster, creating beautiful patterns that looked almost like celebrations. "That's why you disappeared," Kessa continued, understanding flooding through her. "When you solved all the mysteries of the universe, you had no reason to keep growing. No reason to keep exploring. No reason to keep living." Dr. Vextar approached cautiously. "Miss Thane, are you all right? You're speaking as if the sphere is talking to you directly." Kessa turned to face him, tears in her eyes. "It is talking to me, and it's been trying to warn us for 300 years. Warn us about what? About what happens when you stop asking questions, when you think you have all the answers." Kessa looked around at the assembled scientists. The Vorthik created this sphere as a test, not to see who was smart enough or advanced enough to activate it, but to see who was curious enough to ask why it wouldn't work for them. Professor Gent made a rumbling sound that was laughter among his species. "You mean they designed it to be activated by failure?" "No," Kessa said. "They designed it to be activated by questions. Real questions. The kind that don't have easy answers." She turned back to the sphere. "That's why it responds to me, isn't it? Because humans are always asking why and what if and how come. We can't help ourselves. Even when someone gives us an answer, we ask more questions." The sphere pulsed once, very brightly, and Kessa felt a wave of approval and affection from it. "But here's what I don't understand," she said. And the sphere seemed to lean forward with interest. "If asking questions is so important, why did the Vorthik stop? They were explorers once. They must have been curious to achieve so much." The sphere grew dim for a moment, and Kessa sensed deep sadness from it. Then, new images appeared in her mind, showing her the answer to her question. An answer that would change how the galaxy thought about knowledge, wisdom, and the dangerous price of having all the answers. The images that flowed from the sphere into Kessa's mind were clearer this time, like watching a movie made of memories and emotions. She saw the Vorthik civilization at its height, cities that floated in the clouds, ships that moved between stars like fish swimming through water, and technologies that seemed like magic. But then the images shifted to show something darker. "I see them," Kessa said softly, describing what she witnessed for the scientists around her. The Vorthik leaders. They're in a great hall with walls made of crystal. They're discussing. Oh no. The sphere showed her a council of the wisest Vorthik, gathered to solve their civilization's greatest problems. They had developed perfect systems for everything. Perfect governments, perfect education, perfect social order. No crime, no conflict, no inefficiency. They thought they had created paradise, Kessa continued. But their young people were becoming restless. The children were asking questions that the perfect systems couldn't answer. Questions like, why do we have to follow these rules? And what if there's a better way? Dr. Vextar leaned forward intently. What did the leaders do? The sphere pulsed with darker colors as it showed Kessa the answer. They decided that questioning authority was dangerous. They created new laws that made it illegal to challenge the perfect systems. Children were taught not to ask why or what if. Teachers were forbidden from encouraging curiosity about alternative ways of doing things. Professor Ginn made a low rumbling sound. They outlawed questions? Not all questions, Kessa said, watching the painful images unfold. They could still ask questions about how to make the systems work better. But they couldn't ask whether the system should exist at all. The sphere showed her generation after generation of Vorthik growing up under these rules. Children who learned to accept answers without wondering if they were true. Adults who followed instructions without thinking about whether they made sense. A society that became incredibly efficient but lost its soul. Within 1,000 years, they had stopped exploring new worlds, Kessa said. They had everything they needed on the worlds they already controlled. Within 2,000 years, they stopped creating new art or music. Why create something new when the old forms were already perfect? And within 3,000 years, the sphere went dim, showing Kessa images of empty Vorthik cities. Beautiful buildings with no one inside them. Perfect machines running with no purpose. They died out, Dr. Vextar said quietly. Not from war or disease or disaster. They just stopped. Stopped caring, Kessa corrected. When you have all the answers, when everything is perfectly organized, when no one is allowed to question anything, what's the point of living? What's left to discover? The sphere brightened again, and Kessa felt its attention focusing on her with intense interest. The leaders realized their mistake too late, she continued. The last generation of Vorthak built this sphere as a warning. They called it. Kessa paused as strange words formed in her mind. They called it the Chaos Seed. It was designed to find a species that still possessed what they had lost. What had they lost? Asked Dr. Zalith. Kessa smiled sadly. The willingness to question everything, even when the questioner is young and inexperienced. Even when the questions challenge old and respected authorities. Even when the questions don't have comfortable answers. The sphere projected new symbols, and Kessa felt understanding flow through her like warm water. The Vorthik studied every species in the galaxy before they disappeared. They found that most intelligent races eventually develop some form of absolute authority, religious leaders who cannot be questioned, scientific principles that cannot be challenged, or social systems that cannot be changed. She looked around at the assembled scientists. But humans are different. We question everything. We argue with our teachers, challenge our leaders, and refuse to accept that any system is perfect. The Vorthik called this trait the chaos gene, not a real gene, but a way of thinking that keeps a civilization alive and growing. Dr. Yenth buzzed thoughtfully. So the sphere was programmed to recognize this trait. Not programmed, Kessa said. The Vorthik built it to be alive, in a way. It's not just a machine. It's a piece of their consciousness, waiting to find a species that could learn from their mistake. The sphere pulsed brightly, and suddenly Kessa felt a huge presence in her mind. Not invasive or frightening, but warm and welcoming. She realized she was experiencing a direct connection with the last remnant of Vorthak civilization. Images flowed faster now, showing her the true purpose of the sphere. It wasn't just a warning, it was a gift. Hidden inside its crystalline structure were the complete records of Vorthic knowledge and technology. Advances in science, medicine, engineering, and philosophy that could help the galaxy in countless ways. But there was a condition. It wants to give us everything, Kessa said, her voice filled with awe. All their knowledge, all their discoveries. But only if we can prove we won't make the same mistake they did. What kind of proof does it want? Dr. Vextar asked. The sphere showed Kessa the test. It would offer the complete Vorthic database to the galactic civilization. But the knowledge would come with the temptation to create perfect systems, to establish absolute authorities, to stop questioning and start accepting. The test is simple, Kessa said. Can we accept this gift without letting it destroy our curiosity? Can we use their knowledge to build better worlds while still encouraging people to ask if there might be even better ways? The scientists around the room began talking excitedly among themselves. The implications were enormous. With Vorthic technology, they could end disease, solve energy problems, even learn to travel between galaxies. It would be the greatest advancement in the history of civilization. But Kessa felt a chill as she watched their enthusiasm. Already, she could see how easily it could go wrong. Scientists who stopped questioning theories because the Vorthic data said they were true. Governments that stopped listening to critics because the Vorthic systems were proven to be efficient. Teachers who stopped encouraging student questions because the Vorthic educational methods were perfect. We're going to fail the test, aren't we? She asked the sphere quietly. The sphere pulsed sadly, and Kessa felt its ancient loneliness. For 300 years, it had waited for someone who would ask the right questions. But now that the moment had arrived, would anyone be wise enough to choose correctly? The choice wasn't just about accepting or rejecting the Vorthic knowledge. It was about something much more fundamental. Would galactic civilization choose the difficult path of eternal questioning, or would they take the easy path toward perfect answers and slow death? And somehow, the decision seemed to rest with a 19-year-old human girl who had simply asked why, when everyone else was looking for a how. The conference room buzzed with excitement as word spread about the Vorthic knowledge. Representatives from every major government in the galaxy were arriving by the hour. Military leaders, scientists, philosophers, and politicians all wanted to be part of the most important decision in galactic history. Kessa sat quietly beside the sphere, feeling overwhelmed by the pressure. Everyone wanted her to accept the knowledge immediately. They promised to use it wisely, to share it fairly, to never let it corrupt their curiosity. But Kessa could see the hunger in their eyes, the desperate desire for easy answers to difficult problems. Miss Thane, said Grand Admiral Zexes of the Corvian fleet, surely you understand the importance of this opportunity. With Vorthic medical technology, we could cure diseases that have plagued our species for millennia. Think of the engineering advances, added Dr. Mechanical Prime, speaking through his translation device. We could build ships that travel between galaxies. We could terraform dead worlds in years instead of centuries. The philosophical implications alone, said Elder Mistral of the Void Commune, could help us understand the meaning of existence itself. Kessa listened to all their arguments, but she kept thinking about the images the sphere had shown her. Vorthic children who never played because their perfect educational systems were too efficient for games. Vorthic artists who stopped creating because their cultural databases contained the best possible examples of every art form. Vorthic explorers who stopped traveling because their maps already showed every world worth visiting. I need time to think, Kessa said finally. This isn't a decision one person should make alone. But you're the only one who can communicate with the artifact. Dr. Vextar pointed out gently. That doesn't mean I'm the only one who should decide, Kessa replied. Maybe that's part of the test. Maybe the sphere wants to see if I'm smart enough to ask for help instead of trying to be the perfect leader with all the answers. She stood up and addressed the room. I want to talk to young people from different species. Not the leaders or the experts. The students, the children, the ones who still ask questions that annoy their teachers. Grand Admiral Xerxes looked impatient. Miss Thane, with respect, children don't understand the complexities of galactic politics. Maybe that's exactly why I need to talk to them, Kessa said. Adults have reasons for wanting easy answers. Children just want to understand how things work. Over the next day, Kessa spoke with young beings from a dozen different species. A young Zephyrian who wanted to know why adults always said, "That's just how things are," when she asked difficult questions. An insectoid teenager who was frustrated because her teachers discouraged her from questioning traditional hive structures. A lithoid child who wondered why his people's ancient customs could never be changed or improved. Each conversation strengthened Kessa's growing understanding. The problem wasn't the Vorthic knowledge itself. It was the human tendency to stop questioning once you thought you had the best possible answers. Finally, she was ready to make her decision. I want to accept the knowledge, she told the sphere, but not the way everyone expects. The sphere pulsed with curiosity, waiting for her to explain. Don't give us the complete database, Kessa continued. Instead, scatter pieces of Vorthic knowledge throughout the galaxy. Hide them in puzzles that require cooperation between species to solve. Make sure that every discovery leads to 10 new questions. The room erupted in protests. That's madness, Grand Admiral Xerxes declared. We could solve our greatest problems immediately if we had the complete database. And then what? Kessa asked. What happens after we solve all our problems? What happens when we have perfect technology, perfect governments, perfect everything? What happened to the Vorthic? Dr. Vextar stepped forward, his expression thoughtful. You want to preserve the journey of discovery. Exactly, Kessa said. The Vorthic knowledge should help us ask better questions, not give us final answers. Every time we solve one piece of the puzzle, it should reveal 3 new mysteries to explore. She turned back to the sphere. Can you do that? Can you spread the knowledge in a way that keeps us curious instead of satisfied? The sphere's light shifted from blue to brilliant gold, and Kessa felt waves of approval flowing from it. The ancient Vorthic consciousness understood. This was exactly the kind of thinking they had hoped to find. Someone wise enough to choose growth over comfort. Questions over answers, eternal curiosity over perfect knowledge. Images flashed through Kessa's mind, showing her what would happen. Vorthic medical techniques hidden in puzzles that required doctors from different species to work together, leading to new treatments they never could have imagined alone. Engineering secrets scattered across multiple worlds, forcing cooperation between traditional enemies. Philosophical insights embedded in riddles that would take generations to fully understand, ensuring that each answer would inspire countless new questions. It's brilliant, Dr. Vextar said quietly. Instead of giving us fish, you're teaching us how to fish forever. The sphere began to glow brighter than it ever had before. Kessa felt its ancient loneliness finally lifting as it prepared to fulfill its true purpose. Not to share the Vorthic knowledge, but to ensure that knowledge would be used to create something better than the Vorthic had ever achieved. A galactic civilization that would never stop growing, learning and wondering. Wait, said Dr. Zaleth urgently. What about immediate solutions to our current problems? People are suffering now. We could save millions of lives if we had access to Vorthic medical technology immediately. Kessa felt the weight of that responsibility, but the sphere showed her something that eased her concerns. The scattered knowledge wouldn't be completely inaccessible. The most urgent pieces would be hidden in simpler puzzles that could be solved quickly. But even those solutions would come with new questions, new challenges, new mysteries to explore. The sphere promises that no one will suffer because of this delay, Kessa said. The critical knowledge will be found first, but it will be found by people working together, asking questions, building on each other's discoveries, not by downloading a database and stopping there. The sphere pulsed once more, and suddenly beams of golden light shot out from its surface, passing harmlessly through the containment field and the walls of the station. Kessa watched in wonder as the light scattered in all directions, carrying Vorthok knowledge to hidden locations throughout the galaxy. As the light faded, the sphere began to change. Its perfect black surface became transparent, then faded away entirely, leaving only a small golden crystal floating where it had been. Is it dead? Dr. Vexstar asked with concern. Kessa reached toward the crystal and felt a familiar warm presence. No, she said, smiling. It's finally alive. For the first time in thousands of years, it has hope for the future. She picked up the crystal, which was now small enough to hold in her palm. The Vorthok consciousness isn't gone. It's just distributed. Every time someone solves one of the puzzles it created, they'll feel a little bit of its joy in discovery. Grand Admiral Zexes shook his head. I still think you made the wrong choice, young human. We could have had all the answers, but we still would have been asking the wrong questions, Kessa replied. The Vorthok had all the answers, too. Look how that worked out for them. Dr. Vexstar approached her with something that looked like wonder in his large eyes. Miss Thane, do you realize what you've done? You've given the galaxy the greatest gift possible, the guarantee that we'll never stop learning. Kessa looked around the room at all the faces, some disappointed, some confused, but many beginning to understand. I just asked the same question that's been bothering me since I got here, she said. What if we're thinking about this wrong? What if the goal isn't to find all the answers, but to keep finding better questions? As the various officials and scientists began to disperse, already making plans to search for the scattered Vorthok puzzles, Dr. Vexstar stayed behind with Kessa. You know, he said thoughtfully, I've spent 200 years studying dead civilizations. But today, a 19-year-old human taught me something I never learned in all that time. What's that? That the most important discoveries happen not when we find what we're looking for, but when we ask why we were looking for it in the first place. Kessa smiled, holding the warm crystal in her hands. Somewhere in the galaxy, the first Vorthok puzzle was already being discovered by a team of scientists who would spend months working together to solve it. And when they did, they would find not just an answer, but 10 new questions that would lead to even greater discoveries. The Vorthok had finally found what they were looking for, a species that chose wonder over certainty, growth over perfection, and eternal curiosity over comfortable answers. And in choosing that path, humanity had ensured that the galaxy would never make the same mistake that had doomed its first star-traveling civilization. The Age of Questions had begun.